Welcome to Jefferson Liberty Radio, the voice of the state of Jefferson in the Central Valley. I'm Matthew, and today I'm actually joined by Aaron. Alan is not feeling great, so prayers would be appreciated for him. I'm also joined by Pat. Pat, can you tell us about our next meeting?
Next meeting for Stanislaus Concerned Citizens for the state of Jefferson will be January 16th. We will be hosting Ted Howes and Janice Keating, who will be speaking to us at 6:30. More updates on the state of Jefferson and the upcoming gun show. That'll be at 6 o'clock.
Thank you so much, Pat. This episode of Jefferson Liberty Radio is sponsored by AL Certified Safe and Lock. AL's offers locksmithing services and alarm systems for a range of applications, including burglary, fire, timber, medical emergencies, and much more. AL's has been locally owned and managed in Modesto for nearly 70 years, and with thousands of loyal and satisfied customers, you can be sure that AL's will meet and exceed your needs. For more information, call 1-800-700-4780 or go to alsalarm.com. That's ALSALARM.com. Thank you so much to AL's Certified Safe and Lock for sponsoring our show. And now on to the interview. Aaron, take it away.
So we're here today at Jefferson Liberty Radio. We're going to be talking with Mark Baird from State of Jefferson Citizens for Fair Representation. And he also has the Second Amendment lawsuit, which we'll get into a little bit later. We're here with Pat. How you doing today, Pat?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, Aaron?
Doing well.
Doing good.
Thank you. How you doing today, Mark?
I'm doing great, and thanks for having me on. I really appreciate being able to speak, and I appreciate the work you guys do so very much. It's thanks to people like you getting the word out that we're able to do the things we can do.
Oh, thank you, Mark. Thank you for being on. We appreciate your time tonight. Well, go ahead, Aaron.
We'd like to talk to you a little bit about your involvement with Jefferson and the CFR. So maybe you could give us some dialogue about that.
Well, my involvement with Jefferson started, of course, on the first day because we had gathered in Siskiyou County and we listened to a great speech that a former assemblyman gave who tried to separate California with Maurice Johansson, the state senator. Stan Statham was his name. And at the end of the speech, I was talking to a group that we were just standing around talking about how, gosh, we almost got away from Southern California. It actually passed the assembly, and because of personal problems that Stan Statham had with the Senate pro tem, it never made it out of committee. And then I started to do a little thinking about it, and I asked the people around me. I said, "Look, are we going to listen to another speech, have an ice cream, and go home and forget the whole thing, or this time, are we going to do something about it?" And that's how the modern Jefferson state split effort got started. And so it's progressed quite a bit, as both of you know. But I'd like to, people ask, why are you doing this? Why do you need to do it? And I'd like to read you a letter that a friend sent to me. And we've been going back and forth about liberty and the Second Amendment, and just a lot of esoteric concepts, God-given rights and natural law and English common law and things like that. And he wrote me a letter that I think is not only germane, but it's very poignant and something that I will never forget. And I share these thoughts with him on a daily basis. And it's one of the reasons why I'm doing this. He says, "Tonight as I lie in bed with a fat belly and I kick the covers off because I'm too hot, I will remember Jockey Hollow." And for those of you that don't know, that was around the Wick House in Morristown in the winter of 1779, 1780. And it was a very hard winter. He said, "I will remember Jockey Hollow outside of Morristown during the hard winter of 79-80. Outside of Morristown during that winter, and those soldiers must have yearned for the easy life that they had a couple of years before at Valley Forge, because some of them were eating soup made out of burnt leaves and dirt. 3/4 of them didn't have shoes. A third of them were nearly naked. And they suffered from unbearable cold in rags. They were represented by a feckless legislature that could not or would not even provide for the most basic needs of the men who were in the middle of giving everything they had, what Lincoln called the last full measure for the cause of liberty." And he said, "Then, as I drift off to sleep and perhaps I dream, I hope that I might visit them in heaven and be able to apologize for my lack of action that has led to the point where I have squandered the sacrifice and the liberty, and I find myself now having to work hard to reclaim that liberty that they paid for in full for me. I will tell them that many generations after them knew the importance of what they had done, but over the last few generations, we've grown fat and lazy and ungrateful, and we are about to pay the price for our neglect. And I just thought, I read that and I thought, boy, I'll tell you, Dave he certainly understands the concept, and he certainly knows how important what we're doing is, because we have lost our liberty in California. It's gone. I mean, we lost it through our own inattention, our own neglect. We lost it because of the tyrannical criminals that run Sacramento. We lost it because we don't have representation, but it's gone. And what we in Jefferson are trying to do now is to regain a measure of that liberty, and through that measure, regain the rest. Because liberty has a price. It's always had a price. And it's been paid by each generation. And if we fail to pay our share, then succeeding generations will have to pay our share and theirs. And finally, it will get to the point to where this burden can't be met by ordinary means, if you know where I'm going with that. And so it's very important for us who have squandered the liberty that our fathers paid for with their blood, their treasure, and their sacred honor. It's very important that we pay our share so that our future generations don't have to pay ours and theirs as well. And that's how I got involved with Jefferson.
So basically what we're doing is the right thing then.
Always do the right thing. Ben Franklin said, when in doubt, always do what's right. And that's what we must do. We have one job as citizens, and that is to secure liberty to ourselves and our posterity. And that's outlined in the first paragraph of the United States Constitution.
So how did representation become the cause of the lawsuit that's currently in place? And was it the cause, or was it always been the cause?
It's always been the cause because, quite frankly, the root of our lack of liberty goes directly back to lack of representation. And as Thomas Paine said, he said, the first legislature in a colony will be held under the branches of an oak tree. And everybody gathers, and it wouldn't be so much by regulation, but it would be more by chastising those who were indolent or fail to follow the good of the colony. And then later, when the colony grows, we'll have to actually elect representatives. And as we go further in time and the colony grows yet again, we need to add more and more representatives so that each part of the colony remains represented. And more importantly, so that no representative will be able to develop an agenda separate from those who elect him. And so when you look at the state of California in its infancy, in 1850, we had about 40,000 people here. Each county had a state senator. We had 10 state senators. We only had 10 counties. I think we might have had 11 counties, but Santa Barbara County was literally so sparsely populated that the guy that lived one county down would ride through Santa Barbara County, talk to the 8 people that lived there, and then carry their wishes on up to Vallejo. And so in those days, and then all the way up until 1879, representation grew with the population until finally in 1879 it was capped at 80 assemblymen and 40 senators. But it was capped for a reason. The theme of the 1879 constitutional rewrite and constitutional convention was the Chinese must go. And so the legislature stopped adding members to its body in order to keep a growing population of Chinese from gaining access to political power. Well, you say, yes, that's invidious discrimination, but certainly not true now. And you're right. But the difference is the pendulum is always swinging. And in 1879, the discrimination was pointed directly at Mexicans and Chinese. Now it's pointed at all of us. I mean, none of us has adequate representation. None of us can go to Sacramento, air a grievance, and have any reasonable chance that our grievance will be heard and acted upon, because as the population grew, 2 branches of government were allowed to grow like uncontrollable weeds, the executive and the judicial, And yet the People's House has not added one single representative, even though the state has grown in population by 39.5 million people since the last representative was added. And that, to me, is tyranny. And it's also, in my opinion, unconstitutional. And that's what the CFR lawsuit is about.
Yeah, yes, that you caught me off guard there, Aaron. Sorry, I was taking notes.
So, Mark, I was going to ask you, what is the state currently of the CFR lawsuit against Alex Padilla in the state of California?
Okay. Well, as you know, we filed a complaint. It's coming up on 2 years now. Gosh, I can't even think that 2 years has flown by this quickly. But we filed our complaint 2 years ago. We drew Judge Kimberly Mueller, who is a Democratic operative, and I don't have any reason to mince words here. All these things are true. She was a member of the Sacramento City Council. She's a personal friend of Darrell Steinberg's, now the mayor of Sacramento. She is a friend of Jerry Brown's. She and her husband have a ranch very near Jerry and his wife out in near Stony Ford. She's most certainly a dedicated Democratic Party member. And we believe she acted unethically and unconstitutionally in that she found that the people of the state of California, represented by CFR in this lawsuit, are not entitled to a day in court. And so she dismissed our complaint. We refiled the complaint with some amendments. She dismissed the complaint again. We refiled it again. She dismissed it again. And I'm making a really long story short, but because obviously you have time limitations. But what her logic is that our case is correct. It's true. We don't have representation. One state senator can't possibly adequately represent 1 million people, and one assemblyman can't possibly represent 500,000 people. It's true that we have the worst representative ratio in the United States of America, 300% worse than the next worst state. That's all true. But she reasons that since all of the people of California are equally disadvantaged by this institutional tyranny, that there's nothing the court can do about it. It's called the general harm principle. And she also says that courts can't enter into arguments over political questions, and tyranny is a political question, not a legal question. Those are the ways courts deprive you of your liberty. Now, Edmund Coke said in the 1700s, he said all courts are corrupt because the judge knows where their money comes from. And she is certainly one of those. So we believe that Judge Mueller made some radical and indefensible mistakes in that opinion, not the least of which is general harm, because as you may or may not know, there is a Supreme Court case called Shapiro versus McManus, which resulted in congressional action and the creation of United States Code Title 28, Section 2284, I believe, if memory serves, which says any case dealing with representation, dilution of vote, or lack of representation, a federal judge must ask for a 3-judge panel. And then 2284 goes on to say in its subsections, the result of any trial involving a 3-judge panel, primary jurisdiction for the appeal is the United States Supreme Court. Shapiro v. McManus is very clear, the Supreme Court case, that no single judge can be trusted with the people's vote or representation. Any apportionment case, either federal or state, any dilution of vote, any lack of representation case, no single judge can be trusted with that. Now, there is a bar that you have to meet. And this is what Judge Mueller's, what we believe is an intentional misreading. She says that you don't have standing. But in order to cross the standing hurdle, all we have to do is, number one, we have to prove that this is a lack of representation case, which Judge Mueller agreed it was. And we also have to be able to prove that the case is not frivolous or without merit. Well, in open court, our attorney asked Judge Mueller, do you think this case is frivolous? She said, oh, no, Mr. Staffney, this is a very serious question. I don't think it's frivolous at all. She then asked the state's attorney, Michael Waters, Mr. Waters, do you think this case is frivolous? He said, oh, no, Your Honor, I think it's a very serious question and it deserves some argument. But then Waters followed up, but this court isn't empowered to do that argument. They're not empowered to undertake that argument. Well, if the federal court isn't empowered, who is? And then Judge Mueller made an unprecedented move, and she asked for a 3-judge court according to Title 24, 2284, and Shapiro v. McManus. And a week later, she changed her mind and took it back. Well, never in the history of the United States or Title 24 has a judge ever asked for a 3-judge court and then wanted a do-over a week later. And she claims that she had a conversation with another judge, which would be illicit because you can't converse with another court. It destroys the principle of an independent judiciary if you're constantly calling some other court who has not been briefed on the case and asking them what you ought to do. I mean, why would she be the judge if she's going to the Ninth Circuit and asking them, what should I do? What should I do? So we believe that's unconstitutional, and we believe it is indefensible for the state that we created to preserve our liberty to turn to the people who created that state and say, we no longer have an obligation to adequately represent you. We believe that statement is indefensible. We believe it is unconstitutional, and we are going to appeal her ruling, because if we don't fight this, ladies and gentlemen, no one will. We are the only ones in the state of California right now trying to fight the institutional tyranny emanating from Sacramento. And if we don't fight this fight, no one will. And Katie, bar the door now that Gavin Newsom is the governor.
Oh, you are so right about that, Mark. I want to ask you one quick question about the appeal. Now we're going to appeal. It is in the Ninth Circuit. How long? What is the deadline on that appeal? Do you know that answer? And by the way, this is so great that you're giving this information, because we know everything you've said. We know that, but there's so many people who don't. And I'm so glad you're explaining this lawsuit so well and why you have this. So if you could go into the appeal, that would be great.
Well, okay, so here's the rub for us, and this is not a good thing. This is bad, but we have to fight it. The way we proceeded in this case, there was a case before called Abbott versus Evenwell, where Susan Evenwell accused the state of Texas of constructing apportionment districts unlawfully, and she sued. And the way the Evenwell legal team did this, they sued in federal court for lack of representation, dilution of vote. That judge asked for a 3-judge court. They were overruled in the 3-judge court. They then appealed, but because they had the 3-judge court initially in the trial circuit, they were able to go directly to the United States Supreme Court and not have to pass through the appellate process. And we got our plan basically from the Evenwell legal team. We consulted with them. We constructed this plan so that we could avoid the Ninth Circuit, because we know that all courts are corrupt and the Ninth is one of the worst. So what this judge did in denying us our day in court, and think about this, folks. So let's say that China, where Xi Jinping just had the Communist Party Congress declare him president for life. Okay, no term limits. He's a dictator now. Everybody knows it. Now, let's say the Chinese people had a court where they could get justice. And they went into that court and they said, this guy's made himself president for life. He's thrown out the Constitution. There are 1 million Uyghurs in concentration camps. People are disappearing. They're murdered in their beds. And the court said, you're right about all of it. But since everybody in China is equally disadvantaged by this tyrannical murderer, there's no justice in this court. The court can't do anything for you. I mean, you think about that principle and the curtain that judge hid behind. And that's what she did to us. Yes, you have no representation in California. It's all true. Everything in your complaint is true. No one, not even the state of California's attorney, argued that what we said wasn't true. But what she said was, since everybody in California is equally disadvantaged by a tyrannical government with no representation, there's nothing we're going to do for you. So what this judge did was she denied us the appeal to the United States Supreme Court because she found we did not have standing to be in front of her to begin with. Think about that for a minute. We have the First Amendment right to petition the government for redress of grievance. So we went to the legislature with 23 counties. They ignored us. We made an appointment with the governor. He came out and said, I can't see you today because I'm doing really important stuff and I don't have time for your little visit. And so we sued him. And then the court turns to us and says the people of the state of California do not deserve to have the merits of their case heard in this court. And what she did was she cost us that step, and now we have to go to the Ninth Circuit. We don't have any choice. But once again, we've all agreed to fight this out, because if we don't fight, no one will. So to answer your question specifically, no. You can't force a court to do anything. There is no timeline. They could drag their feet for 50 years if they wanted to. We hope they won't, but the people of the state of California have no leverage to compel a court to find justice. None whatsoever. And if that isn't tyranny, I don't know what is.
That is tyranny. That I had no idea that it could go on and on. I thought maybe there was a time limit, but I guess there's not. It's unfathomable what we've gotten ourselves into here. But I believe we're on the right track. And if we don't, like you said, the price of liberty, what is that you always say? The price of liberty is eternal vigilance. Is that it?
That's right. That is right. That's correct.
So can you tell us, how do you donate to the California Citizens for Fair Representation for the State of Jefferson lawsuit? How do you do that? Can you tell us?
The easiest way is to go to soj51.org. That's the official website for the State of Jefferson and for this lawsuit. And then there'll be a donate button there. And also, if you prefer to just send a check or something, then the P.O. box for Citizens for Fair Representation is on the website as well.
Okay, thank you. We've given that information out before, but I thank you for doing it again.
So, Mark, we're wondering, is there going to be an opportunity for more counties to join the lawsuit?
Yeah, I mean, look, we have enough counties now. I mean, we have a viable state with about 2.7 million in population. We're certainly not the smallest state, not by a long shot. We're not the least populous state, not by a long shot. So we're viable right now. But I have to say, I would have a hard time sleeping if good people from a county wanted liberty and we told them, no, we have enough counties already. So if a county wants liberty, form a committee, contact us. We'll send speakers down there. We'll help you get organized. But here's the thing, and you guys know this because you've done this yourselves. We don't go places and do it for them. In other words, this isn't a pill that the state of Jefferson is selling, and you don't have to take it if you don't want it. Every county that's a part of the state of Jefferson asked to be a part of it. We did not sell them something they didn't want to begin with. And so if you have liberty-minded people and you're willing to form a committee and have a couple of town halls and test the water in your own county, we are here and we'll help you. We'll teach you what works, what doesn't work. We have educated and qualified speakers. We'll send them. We'll teach you the process and procedure that has worked for us. And certainly the neighboring counties to whatever county this is would pitch in and help, just like Tuolumne and Calaveras and Stanislaus have helped one another and been very good about that, by the way. And that is really what makes me most proud of the people in the committees and the counties in our state. We have really, really seen people pitch in and help one another. And I'll tell you, it's something you don't see everywhere.
Okay, well, we'd like to go into a more recent endeavor that you've tackled, and that's the Second Amendment case, which we feel is really important. And I was wondering if you could give us some background on this and go in.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
This is really interesting. So there was a guy in Hawaii, and his name was George Young. And there's also a guy that I know well, Charles Nichols. Well, Charles Nichols started this because he went out one day and he decided he had applied for a concealed carry permit. He didn't get it. He lived in a county of more than 200,000 people. He couldn't get an open carry permit. He couldn't get a permit at all. He literally was denied the right to self-defense. And by the way, we allowed the state of California to take the Second Amendment away from us, and no one said a word at the time. I don't remember a hue and cry from myself or anyone else. No one seemed to care. So Charles Nichols got a rusty old shotgun, and he looped it over, and it was obviously inoperable. He made sure of it. He didn't want anybody to think he really had a real gun. And he took a walk in the park. Well, he was immediately arrested for that because you can't open carry in Orange County where he lives. And he fought Orange County, and somehow the state got involved, and he started fighting the state. And this poor guy has been doing this alone for about 7 years. Well, Charles has a case in the Ninth Circuit right now that's fully briefed. The oral arguments have been heard, and he's waiting for the judgment. Well, there was another fella in Hawaii, and this is the operative case right now, George Young, former peace officer. He lives on the Big Island. He went into the County of Hawaii Sheriff's Department, and that encompasses the Big Island. And he says, I want a permit to carry. Some guys have been threatening me. And the sheriff says, well, what kind of permit do you want? Open or concealed? And George says, well, I don't care. Just give me a permit. So the sheriff gives him the concealed carry paperwork. He takes it home. He fills it out. And George used to be a law enforcement officer of some kind. I'm not sure what kind. He takes the paperwork back, and the sheriff says, well, we're not going to give you the permit. And he says, why not? And he says, because we've never, ever issued one of these in Hawaii County.
Oh, my, really?
So George says, well, all right then. He says, give me the other kind of permit, the open carry permit. And the sheriff or his representative said to him, well, are you an armed guard? Are you a licensed armed guard? And George says, well, I'm not. And he says, well, are you a law enforcement officer? And George says to him, well, I'm not one of those either. And he says, well, then you can't have an open carry permit. So they denied him his concealed carry privilege, and concealed carry is a privilege, not a right, by the way. And then they denied him the right to the open carry of a loaded weapon, which is the core right of the Second Amendment. So George sued him, and he got all the way to the Ninth Circuit, and bless his heart, he was lucky enough to draw Judge O'Scanlan. Judge O'Scanlan's pretty famous in the Ninth Circuit. He's probably one of the few real conservatives in the circuit. So Judge O'Scanlan does a very thorough review of several cases, Heller versus D.C., McDonald versus Chicago, Satano versus Massachusetts, Moore v. Madigan, and he decides in George's favor. And here's what Judge O'Scanlan and one other judge, I think his name was Ishii, said. He said, open carry of a loaded weapon is the core right protected under the Second Amendment. Notice he didn't say granted by the Second Amendment, because he went on to say, open carry is the core right protected by the Second Amendment. It predates the Constitution. It is unconnected with militia service. It is not a collective right. It is an individual right to the open carry of a loaded weapon in the event of confrontation with another person, and further, it extends beyond your home into public areas. Now, that's a Ninth Circuit mouthful, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
So George won. Now, here's the problem. George won. Why can't we carry? We're a Ninth Circuit state, and here's the problem. Because the state of California says, well, that doesn't apply to us. Yeah. Well, there's another case in the Ninth Circuit, and these are great things. The Ninth Circuit actually is a funny place, because I'm sure this next case I'm going to talk about was designed to protect some liberal thing they were doing at the time, but it had the benefit of covering a lot of areas. So this case is Chambers versus United States, and what it says in a nutshell is any ruling that issues from the Ninth Circuit is binding on every judge in the circuit, whether the mandate has been published or not, unless or until the case is reheard in bank or overturned by the United States Supreme Court. So Young versus Hawaii says the open carry of a loaded weapon is your right. And Chambers versus U.S. says it applies to every judge in the circuit. So now you must be asking yourself, okay, well, why can't we put our guns on? And the reason for that is because you cannot force a state to stop enforcing an unconstitutional law unless you sue them. And that's where I come in. I'm going to sue the state of California and ask for an emergency order to restrain the state of California from enforcing the provisions of Penal Code 26500, 26450, and 26400, which are the bans on the open carry of a loaded handgun, an unloaded handgun, and a loaded or unloaded rifle. And according to Young versus Hawaii, that is our right. Now, there was another case, Satano versus Massachusetts, where the United States Supreme Court again ruled states may not debar their citizens the right to carry arms in public because states are often more interested in disarming people than they are in keeping them safe. That's pretty clear to me. So I'm going to sue them.
Repeat that.
Yes.
Yes. States are more inclined to.
States may not bar their citizens from the carriage of arms, bearing arms, for their defense because states are often more interested in disarming people than they are in keeping people safe. Okay, now let's go on just a little bit further, and this is why this is important. How many of you think the police are there to protect you? I don't hear anybody saying yes.
Nobody in this room.
Right. Okay. Well, here's the deal for the people that are listening. The state or the government, no state agency, no federal government has the responsibility to protect you from crime or violence or anything else. And further, you may not sue them for liability if they fail to protect you. And you can look up California, and it's California Government Code. So when you put it in if you don't believe me, put this in your search engine. California Government Code, sections 821, 845, and 846. And then when you get finished with that, there's a litany of cases: Warren versus D.C., DeShaney versus Winnebago County, Ballesteri versus Pacifica Police, Martinez versus California, Riss versus New York, and I could go on and on. And in fact, the latest case was Marjorie Stoneman High School. Some of the parents of those dead teenagers sued the Broward County Sheriff deputy who was responsible to protect those children, and the judge threw the case out of court immediately and said the government has no duty and no responsibility to protect the individual. None whatsoever, and further cannot be held liable for failing to protect you. So here's what happens. The Second Amendment guarantees your God-given right to defend yourself, your family, your community, your state, and your nation from evil. That is your guarantee. You must defend yourself because the police either cannot or will not do it for you unless you get really lucky.
Wow. I wonder how many people are just thinking, I didn't know that. I thought the police were here to
protect and serve.
Protect and serve, and yes, and be there when you call them because you hear a sound, and that's just not the case.
Well, I got to say, it's a goal, it's a guideline, but it's not a rule. And I used to be a sheriff's deputy, and I got to tell you, I have gotten calls before, 5 minutes before my shift was over in a snowstorm, and one comes to mind distinctly because it was a stabbing, and the call was an hour and a half from me in good weather. Wow. I arrived at the scene of the stabbing 2 hours after the call for service, and I was going as fast as I could humanly go. And here's the reality of it. Sometimes the police just aren't where they need to be in order to help you. And look at this. What if they helped you, but they didn't help someone else? And that person said, well, you helped John Doe, but you didn't help me. I'm going to sue you. I mean, police can't be everywhere all the time, and they're not precognitive. They have no idea who's about to commit a crime across town. So when you think about it, those laws are fair and just because the police would constantly being sued for protecting someone and failing to protect somebody else, or something like that. But look, the God that created you endowed you with certain inalienable rights. And among those was the right to defend your life, your liberty, and your property. And we have squandered that right. And what I'm trying to do with this lawsuit is open the door to get some of it back. And if I can do that, then with the help of everybody in Jefferson and hopefully everybody in California, we can get the rest back.
Well, on that note, how do people, if they choose to do so, how do they donate to this cause? Give us that.
Dave Titchnell set up a website called www.tokeepandbear, all lowercase, no spaces. So tokeepandbear.com, and there's an address there, and then the Reading Patriots group, their charity, very generously set up a separate bank account under the auspices of the charity for the Second Amendment lawsuit. And I want everyone to know, I don't get money from this. We have no paid staff. We have no administrative assistance. 100% of the money goes to the lawyer to fight this case. And here's another one for you. I couldn't even find a California attorney that had the backbone to take this case. They were all scared. I finally found an attorney in New York that wasn't afraid to take this case on.
Yes, and that was in New York. Is that what you said, New York?
Yeah, I found an attorney in New York who's going to take on a California federal case because there was no California attorney that would step up to the plate on this one. Now, I have been in contact with George Young's attorney, Alan Beck. He's been great. He's been briefed on the case. He's helping us where he can. I have other attorneys who are interested in this and are contributing advice, although they're not attorneys of record. They're kind of helping out where they can. But the attorney that I have is feisty and tough and smart, and I think we can win this. And
awesome.
Now I want everybody to consider this, though. What happens when you corner a very dangerous animal?
Yes.
So we're going to win this, and it is going to make heads explode in Sacramento under the dome.
Undoubtedly. Hey, Mark, I do know that you've got a fundraiser coming up, and I think this will air in time for you to give out that information. Do you have anything available for that fundraiser up in Wairika? Is that where it is?
This has been great. The community pulled together. We put together a really fun fundraiser dinner. We're going to have a prime rib dinner with twice baked potatoes and some really neat stuff. We're auctioning off some great stuff. A lady here, and I'll tell you, I was absolutely floored by this. She made a Betsy Ross theme quilt that is the most beautiful piece of art I think I've ever seen.
Wow.
And I mean, she spent months making this thing, and we're going to auction that off. My wife and I are donating some stuff. Everybody's donating some stuff. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun. And we had 240 seats, and we've sold 256 tickets.
Oh wow! So you're full then.
So we're absolutely sold. We're absolutely sold out. But if people want to donate to the case, To Keep and Bear is the way to do that. And I urge gun owners, look. Here's another concept that we've kind of overlooked in Jefferson because we have a tendency to stop at our own borders. But there are 8 million gun owners in California. 8 million. If we of the Jefferson committees could simply convince the 8 million gun owners that it's a good idea to vote conservative, we could win any election we want, any day of the week, and we could take this state back at the very next statewide election if we could simply convince gun owners to vote.
That is amazing. That is mind-boggling. That just that would help us bring back some liberty to our to California, or to State of Jefferson. Excuse me.
Sure. You know, my dream is that if we could win this one, and I think we can, then we can stand on a stump, all of us, because it's all of us working together that make this happen. And we could say to the rest of California, you're welcome for the liberty the people of Jefferson just handed you. Now, if you'd like the rest of it, get off your butt and help us.
Yes, that we do need help. We need help in Stanislaus County. I know every county could use a little bit of help.
Yes.
Just getting out and, getting a few signatures or talking about it, just talking about the state of Jefferson. I think if we win this, we're poised, and we can literally start a statewide, maybe even a national conversation about liberty and what happened to it. There you go.
And how we can get it back. Let's get people talking, and then let's get them involved and get them to show up. Because, if we were able to march on the Capitol in Sacramento with 100,000 people one time, we would win. We'd win something.
We'd win. Yes. They would have to listen to us. They'd have to listen to us.
They'd have to. They would have to listen to us.
That would be fantastic. Okay, Aaron, is there anything else?
Well, we got a request from a question from Alan that he'd like to ask you, Mark. It's with the state of California dishonoring the U.S. Constitution so often, do you think California will follow the Second Amendment?
Well, here's the thing. If we get a TRO from a judge, and this would be a federal judge because deprivation of rights, we couldn't win this in state court because state courts are corrupt, absolutely and fully corrupt. But in federal court, we might have a chance. So if we can get a judge that will grant the restraining order and then turn it into an injunction 2 weeks later when the restraining order expires, then California would have no choice but to follow the edict of the court, or they would be in sedition. And if they ignore a court order ordering them to allow people the exercise of their God-given inalienable rights, and they say no to that, that puts the state of California in sedition, and then we appeal to the United States Congress for statehood because we're not seditionists.
Well, thanks a lot, Mark, for being with us this evening. It's been a wonderful interview, and we appreciate you bearing with us.
Well, great information. And I want to thank you again for giving all the information out that about the state of Jefferson, because we have given that out and we know it so much. We know it by heart. But it really helps to get that information out. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
good
you
luck
for that.
with the Second Amendment, the open carry lawsuit.
We will.
Yeah, I think that's gonna go pretty quick too. So we will know something about that, I think, because this is, in other words, we're not writing a case here. The case has already been decided. The law has already been issued on this. All we need to do is force the state to follow their own rules. And so I think this will go pretty quickly, guys, and we might have some information. We might know something about this in a month or so.
Oh, that's so exciting. It really is exciting to me that maybe we'll get somewhere with this lawsuit. And I'm backing you all the way, buddy.
Yeah, we're behind you.
If we can win this, we can win other things. And I think that's more my goal than anything else. We need to win one of these things so that we can teach people we can win. And once we have won, we can win again and again and again until finally we're the masters of our own fate again. And that's what this state was designed to do, was to guarantee our freedom for us.
Very good. Well, thanks again, Mark, for all your time tonight, and looking forward to getting this information out to everybody. Thank you. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you for all you do.
Thank you. God bless you.
God bless you,
bless
sir.
you all. And,
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay, upcoming events and meetings for the Stanislaus Concerned Citizens for the state of Jefferson are as follows. January 16th, we have Ted House and Janice Keating, who will be speaking at 6:30. We'll have updates on the State of Jefferson and the upcoming gun show at 6 o'clock. January 30th, Mayor Ted Brandvold will be speaking to us at Fuddruckers on McHenry and Modesto at 6:30. That'll be in the back room. February 6th, we'll be back at Grizzly Rock Cafe, and we will have Mayor Amy Bublack, who will speak to us at 6:30, and the updates on SOJ will be at 6 o'clock. Exciting meetings coming up, folks.
Thank you so much, Pat. If you're interested in sponsoring our show, you can head over to jeffersonlibertyradio.com or email us at sponsors@jeffersonlibertyradio.com. We would also love to hear from you. You can email us at feedback@jeffersonlibertyradio.com or via our website, again, jeffersonlibertyradio.com. We'd love to hear your comments, questions, and feedback. Don't forget to subscribe to us in iTunes or your podcast player of choice if you aren't already. We'd love it if you'd leave us a 5-star rating. We'd really appreciate it, and it actually does help our ratings. You can find us on all the typical social medias, Facebook, Twitter. You can also find our episodes on Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, and even some alternative media such as BitChute and Gab. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Jefferson Liberty Radio, and we'll catch you next episode.